How does a department go from a serial arsonist responsible for 23 fires with no leads
Vehicles being torched in the middle of the night?
to cracking the case in less than 6 days?
A five-man department can do the same thing. They don't have to have supercomputers.
And how do you begin to contain the violence of a border town
Last year in 2008, over 1,600 murders.
and keep it from spilling over into your city?
The violence of itself, just the way some people are killed over there.
Fusion centers are a key factor in both of these stories. Coming up, we will take you inside a modern fusion center in Dallas, Texas, and see how law enforcement is utilizing the latest technology to combat crime. Then we will visit the El Paso Police Department and see how they are preparing to defend their city amidst a major drug war. Today on LETN.
Subject with a gun. Repeat, subject with a gun. Got multiple shots, multiple shots.
We got a major explosion.
Right here,
Hello, I'm Bob Taylor, and I'm the new Director of Education. We're here today at the Dallas Police Department in Dallas, Texas, to view their Fusion Center. These are interesting, high-tech hubs of information where data is analyzed and then sent out to you, the officer on the street. Providing officers on the street with accurate and timely information are what Fusion Centers are all about. Let's take a closer look.
After viewing this program and completing the written courseware, you should be able to display an understanding of the function of fusion centers, state and discuss the various criticisms of fusion centers, describe the individual police officer's role as it relates to intelligence gathering, fusion centers, and homeland security, and finally, understand the necessity for intelligence-led policing, specifically fusion centers in a post-9/11 society. In today's world of instant access, we are constantly inundated with more information than ever before. But how much of this information is useful? Are you getting the right information to help you do your job effectively?
Septions 13, I'm on scene. We got a major explosion at Marathon.
Fusion centers just may be the answer. The events of September 11, 2001 changed law enforcement forever. It became clear that useful intelligence was not effectively shared between agencies. With this in mind, the idea of an information hub that would collect and disseminate all the data began. Lieutenant Todd Thomason is a 23-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department. He is in charge of their fusion center and tells us what they do.
Our main objective or purpose, mission at the Dallas Police Department Fusion Center is to serve as a nerve center for the department, if you will, to keep a situational awareness of what's going on in the city at all times, having information and intelligence flow into one place where it's analyzed, vetted, things that are actionable and can be of use to someone. We package that up and get it out to the ones that need it in a near real-time basis.
A perfect example of how the fusion process can help solve a case happened recently in Dallas. A serial arsonist was on the loose and setting vehicles on fire. In a 3-week period, over 20 cars had been targeted. Arson investigators from the Dallas Fire Department did not have much to go on, so they called the Fusion Center to see if they could help. Lieutenant Thomason explains what happened.
So we brought in the arson investigators. We brought in a lot of our covert guys from throughout the city, and we made sure that every detail about these fires was collected and documented in the Fusion Center to where anyone involved in these cases could see it all.
Using an I2 analyst notebook chart, Mike was able to visually display all the information that had been collected. This allowed investigators to compare and analyze every detail that was coming in.
This is an I2 chart of the arsons that were occurring in our city. I was able to go to Dallas Fire and Rescue and obtain the photographs and also the offense reports. So what I did is I began compiling all these offenses on an I2 chart. There was also some information or photos on evidence that I was able to put in the chart also, showing what type of items they were using in the offense.
The first clue that we really had was in talking to the arson investigators over each case that they'd covered so far. And I think they were about 22 or 23 when we got involved. One of them said, well, I had somebody that said they saw a white Ford Explorer or a Suburban driving about 2 blocks away after they thought the fire had happened. They didn't see anybody doing anything. They had no license plate, no nothing. But that was a very important piece of information. It stayed in the back of everybody's mind once we made sure it was documented and in the case report. We had another fire, and a pretty savvy street officer remembered that that was near a high school.
Knowing that the intersection of the high school was equipped with a video camera, investigators now had a second lead and possibly video of the suspect's vehicle.
Fusion Center personnel went over to the DISD school building and asked them to review the tape, and we've got our first image of the suspect vehicle leaving the scene of the offense. Based on this information and based on the crime mapping that we did, we could see that this vehicle was possibly going to be in this area around a circle of the offenses. Dallas Fire and Rescue personnel, arson investigators went into that area and was able to locate both suspect vehicles that possibly matched the ones seen leaving the offense locations.
That's still very circumstantial, very weak, but that was what broke the camel's back. A high school kid did live there. Looking at his school records, every time there had been a fire, he was absent from school the next day, tired from staying up burning cars all night. So we felt better, and then through some surveillance techniques, we caught him loading some gasoline, and then we pulled everybody on board at night and followed them.
2 nights into the surveillance, a department helicopter videotapes the suspect setting fire to a porta potty and later setting fire to a vehicle. The suspects were immediately arrested and are now serving time in the state prison.
It was a combination effort of not just Dallas police officers in the field, but also Dallas Fire and Rescue, Dallas Independent School District Police. There was a lot of entities that were involved in stopping the crime.
Now, I'm not saying the Fusion Center solved this case, because it was all those boots on the ground and people talking and telling us everything that we could write it down and show it to everyone. But 6 nights later, our helicopter has them on the flare blowing up a porta potty and a car.
The center, which began in early 2007 with a staff of about 3 people, has now grown to 35 that serve in a variety of ways.
We've adapted to some specialized positions that we needed and then some other ones. All of our personnel, except for 2, are sworn detectives. Some serve as detective analysts that are looking at trends, patterns, data, things of that nature. And then we have some intelligence detectives that will work in the field along with, in the Fusion Center, some basically gathering human information.
In addition to department personnel, the center could also have liaisons from surrounding departments as well as state and federal agencies.
534 India.
221 the complainant and see if they can come to the door if I'm not getting an answer.
This ability to communicate in a timely manner is key to the Fusion Center's success.
We've always worked well with surrounding agencies, but it's always been by phone call. And now the ability to inform them all of one thing that we know that we think they need to know with the click of a button is a time saver.
The Department of Homeland Security has played an integral role in the development and implementation of Fusion Centers all around the country. As of February 2009, 58 Fusion Centers have been established around the country. The DHS has deployed 31 officers and plans to have 70 more deployed by the end of 2009. DHS also has provided more than $254 million to state and local governments to support the centers. While Fusion Centers will vary from city to city, the main goal is to collect, analyze, and share information that's collected in the field. Mike Freeman is a senior criminal intelligence analyst for Dallas Police Department and walks us through the process.
Information's gathered throughout various different methods. Number 1, police officers on the street, they enter in stuff into our police report system, suspects, witnesses, complainants, and vehicles. We also have gang cards that we can research through. We have a crime intel database, which narcotics enters information in on suspects, cars, houses, all that good stuff. And then we also have databases in vice and sexual offenders. All those different databases are available to us that we can research to find what we're looking for.
Bridge traffic, domestic violence, 3777 East McDowell.
534 India.
Before we had fusion centers, officers would be dispatched on certain types of calls, such as a robbery or a shooting, where they would have partial information. The officers would just take the partial information and write a report, and it would be passed on to a detective who would eventually look at it a day or two later. The fusion center is monitoring the radio and monitoring the activity on the street, and we're hearing what's going on. The officers can call us, or we can start working on it on our own on these partial tags or suspect names, such as street names or nicknames.
There's communications happening there daily to where we all know what each other's doing and what's going on that simply did not happen 5 years ago. We had no concern of what was going on in Houston, Texas, here in Dallas. We were focused on what's here. Well, we've proven now what's here is there, and criminals don't really recognize geographic or city boundaries. They travel.
We are not just the Dallas Police Department Fusion Center. We give information throughout the Metroplex. We have agencies calling us daily, asking for information or having them help them on some of their cases that they're working. We also work with the federal agencies throughout the Metroplex. We've had people call us throughout the United States. The word is getting out. We try to service these people as quickly as possible. And what I always try to look back on it as, it used to be if you needed something from an agency, you'd have to go through the phone tree to find someone that would help you. Now, we are the phone tree. We will get you their information as quick as possible.
While the Fusion Center may be located in a particular location, Lieutenant Thomason believes it is more of a process than an actual place.
The process involves cultural changes within traditional law enforcement agencies, a different way of thinking more about sharing information for a common good of problem solving instead of holding that information into your chest, which traditionally in law enforcement, that's what we've done.
With all this information coming to one central hub, it would be easy to overload the patrol officer with too much information. That is why everything that comes into the Fusion Center is vetted before it is sent out into the field.
We're getting offense reports in every day. We're getting suspicious person reports in. We need to look through those, determine if it's valid or if it's not valid. If it's a valid issue that we need to address, then we will begin to research it. And then once we have researched it and again found out it to be a valid issue that we need to send out to the officers, then we will produce bulletins that we will send out to the officers in the field and to the stations.
Is there some actionable intelligence to it? Is it of use to them? Is it something that has not already been in the newspaper that I don't need to waste their time putting out? That way we try to keep them, giving them things that are useful for them, things they can act on, and keep them from going into information overload.
Crime analysis and mapping kind of coexist. They kind of mesh together. When we have a series of offenses, I will use the crime mapping to throw different layers on a map. This is where the arsons were occurring at. I've already mapped the offenses of where the arsons occurred, but then I went in and mapped out where all the wanted felons were. Could it have been those suspects that were wanted? We don't know. But what are the chances are you could send some officers out in the area, start rounding some people up that have warrants, and see if they will talk and see if they will give us information. The information is like a puzzle. Little bits of data is spread throughout. What we want to do is take that information and piece it all together.
First name Tariq, Tom, Adam, Robert, Ida, Queen.
If officers are able to give us little bits of information, street names, vehicles, known locations, then we can actually make their job a lot easier, and also for the investigators who are investigating different types of offenses.
By utilizing all of these assets, law enforcement is now able to deploy their resources more effectively. By targeting patrols to known hotspots of criminal activity, officers now have the vital information that can make a big difference. With all of the positives that we have spoken of in this program, fusion centers have come under scrutiny. Due to the large amount of personal information processed by fusion centers, it is easy to understand how many Americans might feel apprehensive about the idea of an all-knowing government database. The American Civil Liberties Union published a report in December of 2007 highlighting some of the possible privacy and civil liberty infringements stemming from fusion centers. In their report, they focused on 5 key areas: ambiguous lines of authority, private sector participation, military participation, data fusion, and excessive secrecy. While Lieutenant Thomason understands this concern, he points out that fusion centers are limited to what personal information they can access.
Now, there have been some problems as these things have evolved of defining roles, having developed an adequate, open, transparent privacy policy. Fusion centers, local police, by statute, cannot look at it. We don't look at anything, can't look at anything that doesn't have a criminal nexus to it. If someone is not suspected, reasonably suspected, of being involved in criminal activity, I can't look at them, and I shouldn't be able to look at them. We are here as peace officers and to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. In Dallas, we have a privacy policy, and we are going to invite the ACLU in to look at it and address any concerns that they may have with it.
You may be thinking that Dallas is a big department, so of course they can afford to have a fusion center. But the truth is, you do not have to be a big department to benefit from a fusion center.
A 5-man department can do the same thing. They don't have to have supercomputers, as long as they change that thought process of there's someone out there that if I need data or if I need information, there's going to be a way in the near future to get it, whether you run it through the state, and this is all done electronically. It's it's not manpower intensive at all. Everyone, I think, needs to be involved in that process. Not everyone needs a fusion center. Is ours, it's more of a tactical intelligence center, to be honest.
Fusion centers are probably going to be the wave of the future for policing. I believe that once agencies see the benefit of fusion centers, then they're going to want to either send personnel from their department into a fusion center to be a liaison, or maybe step up their own fusion centers, because policing has changed. The old style way of reactive policing will not stop the crime. We've got to adapt to the new way of crime fighting, and the new way of crime fighting is exchanging information with everyone.
If you decide you want to begin the fusion process, it is important to learn from other departments. While high-tech systems may be a sexy part of a fusion center, Lieutenant Thomason says that's not the most important element.
Looking back through this entire project, a lesson learned for me would be in the beginning, we were very much focused on looking at systems, looking at technology, looking at supercomputers, when I should have been looking at people. Who are the right people for these positions? Because technology is absolutely a critical part, but it will never replace the human factor. That is still the most important part of this fusion process.
One final thought on information sharing. Dallas Chief Kunkel has passed on a saying that fits right in with what they are doing with the Fusion Center. Lieutenant Thomason explains.
If every cop knew what every other cop knew, there would be no crime. And that hasn't changed over time. From a song in the 60s, I like to use communication is the problem to the answer. And when you have an agency of 3,400 sworn people trying to keep them informed of what is pertinent to them during that day, what is actionable by them without making them suffer from information overload, is quite a task, and that's what we try to manage here in the Fusion Center by knowing a little bit about what everybody's doing and coordinating a lot of the efforts.
It's time for our Did You Know segment. Did you know that Fusion Centers often maintain public tip lines to promote public involvement and awareness to terrorist threats? The goal is to identify and recognize warning signs and potential threats in a timely manner in order to preempt terrorist attacks. El Paso, Texas. In many ways, it's your typical American town. The citizens take pride in their heritage and they celebrate a rich and diverse culture. The one thing that makes El Paso different from most cities is that it shares the border with Juarez, Mexico. This brings challenges that few police departments have to face. Illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and weapons trafficking are just a sample of what the department deals with on a daily basis. But with all these issues, the 1,100-man department has done a great job of policing. El Paso was recently named the 3rd safest city in the United States. But across the border is a completely different story. In Juarez, the 2 major drug cartels are waging a violent and bloody war over access to the Juarez corridor. In 2008, Juarez reported over 1,600 murders, leaving the citizens of El Paso to wonder if it could spill over into their city. As fusion centers began showing up across the country, the El Paso PD knew that the model fit their needs perfectly. Peter Pasillas is an assistant chief in El Paso.